just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
You're tuned into another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. We are doing a series here where we're breaking down not only each position group, but we're taking specific prospects, comparing them, talking about how they might fit in the rankings of this class. Because right now we're in summer scouting. It is early on, so we're trying to be loose with this, trying to be fun. Today, we already did C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. Today, we are doing Hendon Hooker, the Tennessee quarterback, and Will Levis, the Kentucky quarterback. So, Ryan, are you excited today to talk about these two guys, two traitsy guys that maybe haven't really reached that full upside yet?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun because, like we kind of talked about with the last episode, there's two players at the quarterback position that you feel pretty good about, maybe potentially being the top two quarterbacks off the board as of right now. But after that, there's a huge question mark. I think I've seen probably 11 or 12 quarterback threes combinations so far. It's not even summer scouting yet, it's spring scouting. But yeah, it's going to be fun because these are guys that are different, but they're also kind of similar. There's definitely some similarities we can kind of pull from, which I think will be a good comparison piece.
Yeah, one thing's for sure that these guys are both very, very good athletes. It's something that comes into play here. I mean, we're going to get into talking about them. Before we do, though, folks, I just want to tell you about our sponsors today, Bet Online. Our partners at Bet Online continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA, NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to their website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Ryan, you hit on the one key thing here with these two guys. After you get past the Stroud, Bryce Young conversation, and I firmly believe that is going to be the point of discussion throughout for this quarterback group. It's not going to really move away from those two guys unless, as we mentioned, there is a significant drop-off. But what now becomes interesting is when we talk about quarterback 3, there are so many different names that are in this mix. You hear possibilities of maybe Hendon Hooker. It's more likely the ones you hear a lot are Will Levis. Phil Dracovic from Boston College has been brought up. You've also seen Anthony Richardson from Florida, which we're not going to entertain. We're not going to bring him up. Guys like Devin Leary have also been discussed. There's just a lot of options.
Tyler Van Dyke from Miami is another one. Yeah,
Tyler Van Dyke from Miami is another one as well. Remind me to tell you something about Tyler Van Dyke, by the way. I think I forgot if I told you or not.
Oh, no,
but
no,
you're gonna love it. But for these two guys, the one thing that has really pushed up Will Levis is his arm strength, and that has been the big thing that's hyped him up so much. It feels like everyone is really banking on that arm strength. Not a lot has been brought up with some of the other parts of his game, but this is a big, strong athlete that has, would you say, the strongest arm in the class? I think it's up there.
Yeah. I'm combing through in my mind real quick of guys I've seen. Yeah, no, he's definitely up there. If not number one, I'm trying to think, man, because I'll say this: the ball explodes off his hand. Like, it's a very natural type of thing, which is weird because I don't know if you ever saw him at Penn State when he was behind Sean Clifford, but they treated him like a wildcat quarterback. They didn't let him throw, which was pretty hysterical. Yeah, it was funny. So yeah, now I would say he's got the most explosive arm, if anything else. Like, the great arm speed on a guy like a Will Levis. The ball just comes out of his hand so naturally.
So while he does have that arm strength, I think one of the things that pop up in his game, and this is also one of the differences you get between him and Hendon Hooker, the ball flies off his hand, and I always saw some relative consistency when he was completing some of his shorter throws. They do a decent amount of that in that Kentucky offense. But when you started to see him throw more in these intermediate routes to deeper routes, that was when the accuracy issues started to pop up, the inconsistency, but also some questionable decision making on some of those throws as well. So that inability to connect on those throws is a problem. You might have a cannon for an arm, but if you're not hitting on those passes that are wide open, you can get the ball out quickly, but you're not getting the ball to your receiver, it's a bit of a problem.
You know what I think? Will Levis, I think, is the biggest victim of just how quarterbacks have kind of evolved recently with the off script, off platform, throwing from multiple arm angles things. There are some times where I feel like he just needs to get his feet set and just deliver an easy pass, and he just kind of just does something funky, some unorthodox approach, and that really kills his accuracy overall, I think, right? So I think that there's accuracy there to a degree. I just think that he's such a wild approach of a quarterback because he hasn't been playing it obviously very long, only a 1-year starter since transferring from Penn State, but he's just, I think the word that comes to mind, Joe, and I would love to hear your opinion on this but unorthodox is Will Levis. Like everything is just off scripts, off platform, off the cuff. Like he is a wild card as a thrower. And a lot of times it looks beautiful and a lot of times it works. But then I feel like there's just sometimes where, like, from a technical perspective, you need to rein him in a little bit, like he needs to be a guy that's more like, all right, I'm going to stay on script a little bit more. I'm going to go through the progressions. I'm going to stick to my technique and not be as much of a wild thrower as he can be sometimes.
Yeah, there's also not a whole lot of consistent footwork that you get from him, but we do kind of get this backyard style of football with a lot of quarterbacks, and I've noticed that from this being my first class that I'm evaluating, you do get a lot of that. You do get guys that try to do that stuff way too often, way more than they need to. And there are guys that do it really, really well, and it's part of their game. And I think that it is part of Levis's game. But as you're saying, he doesn't really need to do that much. And part of me wonders, after a full season last year, an off season and a spring to learn and evaluate, is this something that Coach Bob Stoops is saying to him, like, hey, we need to reel this in. If you want to make it to the NFL, we need to work on this accuracy. You need to be somebody who's a little bit more, it's not that he's not composed, because I think he had really good composure in the pocket, especially the Georgia game, because he was getting blasted in the Georgia game.
Yeah.
But he needs to be a lot less erratic with how he handles himself on a lot of these throws that he makes.
You know who I bet I would guarantee, who I think is probably his role model growing up, would bet money on this.
I'm trying to think who's like all over the place. RG3?
No, what? No.
I don't know. I was just trying to think who loved to do that shit before Patrick Mahomes came around.
I guarantee that he loved watching Brett Favre. Guarantee it, man. Because Brett Favre was one of the most talented quarterbacks ever. He had a rocket for an arm, really good athlete, stocky build, sort of like a Will Levis. But there were just some times where Brett Favre, you were just like, buddy, take it down a notch, man. Like, you don't have to try that ball right there. You don't have to be off script all the time. And that was the best of what Brett Favre was, the fact that he can make some of that magic happen. And then it was the downfall of Brett Favre a lot, too. It's why he has such a high interception total in his career, right? Like, those were the things that would make or break a Brett Favre. And I am definitely not comparing Will Levis to Brett Favre. I'm just saying I think that he has probably watched a little too much Brett Favre in his career, because there is just some moments where you're just like, bud, take it down, man. Like, you don't need to do all that. That is just a little bit too much. But for that fact, that's what's going to make him so appealing, is the fact that he can do things that are just unnatural at times. He does things where you just kind of hold your breath for a second, because he's just so physically gifted. So I'm going to fall in love with Will Levis probably 17 times this draft cycle because of all the great things he can do. But then there's going to be that inkling in the back of my mind that's going to be like, but man, if he doesn't figure this out, out, he is going to self-destruct, because he's just too much of a wild card right now.
And that's why I understand why he's in this conversation to be in the top 3, in the top 5 of this quarterback group. Like, he has all those traits. It's not like There are some other quarterbacks in this class that have really not brought any of those things to the table, or even have like as big of an arm as he does, or provide as much value as a runner as he does. Those guys are a little bit more confusing, but I totally get why Levis is in this conversation. But what we now need from him, so he's not just hovering in that quarterback 3 spot and ends up being like a day 2 quarterback, is he needs to play with those traits effectively. He has the capability, but does not really have the performances and the statistics to back up what he is able to do. And we're just not there yet. And he's capable of getting there. He can totally do that this year. It's one thing that we're going to say a lot, I think, throughout this summer, and I've heard you say a lot, is that taking that next step with the traits that you have is what is going to solidify you as potentially being a highly drafted guy.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. That was my apologies.
Nice.
But yes, there's a big drop after quarterback 2 in this draft, and there's a lot of guys, Hendon Hooker included, that we're going to talk about here in a second, that have tools for days, but it's just not there right now, right? Like this is if Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were not in this class right now, it would look a lot like this past cycle we just looked at, right? There would be a lot of Desmond Ridder types. There would be a lot of Malik Willis types, really incredible tools that you can get behind, but they're just not ready to play football right now. That's what I kind of see with Will Levis and the rest of this crew right now, is there is extreme development that needs to happen. It can happen, and it probably will. There'll probably be at least 1 or 2 that makes the jump, but you still need to see it before you get on board with it.
Talking on Hendon Hooker, and I pointed out that Will Levis is not great at hitting intermediate to deep throws. I see Hendon Hooker, and some of his shorter throws are off. They're not very on target. Same thing with some of his intermediate throws. It's just a strange placement. Sometimes he forces some of the balls that he's trying to throw. But man, I love his deep accuracy. Like his ball placement on deep throws. There's some tight windows I saw him hit. He hits guys in stride. Like maybe it's just from the 2 games that I watched of him. I watched Alabama and Georgia, but his deep accuracy, it's almost if you put that deep accuracy into Will Levis's game, you'd have a much more complete prospect. And it's kind of funny to compare the 2. But that was the one thing that jumped out to me, because Hooker doesn't have a cannon. He's got a good arm, but he doesn't have the cannon that Levis does. But that deep accuracy just kept standing out to me when I was watching him.
Yeah, no, there were always flashes when he was at Virginia Tech, right? He was there for, I guess, 4 years, and he transfers to Tennessee for what was perceived to be his final year, but now he's obviously opted to go back for his 6th year at Tennessee. There was always flashes, man. He throws some balls intermediate to deep sometimes where you're just like, oh, that's unique. That's different. And we can get behind that type of conversation. It was just at Virginia Tech, man, the coaching staff was just they were not advantageous to using his skill set. They were jockeying back and forth. Quincy Patterson, Braxton Burmeister, Hendon Hooker. And I felt like every time I watched, I was just like, oh, Hendon Hooker is the best quarterback on this roster, like bar none. I mean, at least from a talent level perspective. And then luckily Tennessee, I mean, they had Joe Milton starting the year, the Michigan transfer, and he couldn't hit a broadside of a barn to throw deep, man. Like it was awful. He was just overthrowing everything. And then Hendon Hooker comes in and he's connecting on those deep balls. I think he's a really natural thrower. He changes arm speeds well. I think he throws with good touch. There's a lot to like with Hendon Hooker. There really is from an arm strength perspective, from a touch perspective, from an accuracy perspective. Honestly, I thought he was a pretty accurate quarterback overall. And then you get into the athleticism side of things where my guy can run. He's a really impressive athlete, as is Levis, which is why this is a good comparison.
So let me ask you this, though, because I was racking my brain on, like, I always like to think of, like, how fast certain guys are. So, like, I was watching Jahmyr Gibbs because I was watching the Boston College Georgia Tech game, and, like, Jahmyr Gibbs popped off, like, when I was watching. I was like, holy crap, like, this dude is fast.
Yes.
And I was trying to guess that, like, he might be, like, a low 4.4, maybe even faster type guy because he's that fast. But how fast do you think Hooker is? Because, like, he's big. He's not like speedy. He's not like Lamar Jackson 4.3, obviously. No. He's more of like a bigger, stronger runner. So, like, what would you say, like 4.6?
Yeah, I would say I was going to say like 4.68 to 4.72, somewhere in that
Okay.
ballpark. He's like the Andrew Luck, Mitch Trubisky type of tier of speed. Like
Yeah.
those guys can both run, but they're bigger guys too, right? Like, I mean, Hendon Hooker's 6'3" and
6'4".
some change and 220 something pounds. Like, he's a bigger guy. So yeah, he's fast. I bet you Will Levis is even faster. He's probably 4.6 low. I bet you Will Levis is
Wow.
like a 4.62-ish type of athlete. But I mean, yeah, but I would say he's got more than enough athleticism. There's no doubt about that.
Just some of the things that like I noticed from watching Hooker that I wasn't necessarily a big fan of. It feels like if one throw works for him, he just keeps trying to go back to it, even if after that first time it's not there. Like the game I'm referring to. Oh no, it was the Kentucky game, not the Georgia game that I watched. The Kentucky game where
Mm-hmm.
they kept running this comeback route, and he got it like the first cut like a couple times, and then he kept trying to throw it in really really tight coverage
Mm-hmm.
where his receivers were not open. So like that to me was really frustrating to watch, and I just kept saying like, why the hell are you still trying to complete this pass, and also why the hell are you still running this route concept if they know that it's coming? That's a whole
Right.
separate issue. And then I also was a little bit deterred by how he handles himself in the pocket sometimes. Like I just think that he did look a little bit antsy. The Kentucky game particularly, he kept dropping snaps. That's a problem. Like that's something that
Yeah.
needs to be fixed. And I don't know if that's like a mental thing. I don't know if that's like he just has a bad grip on the football, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
might be. Maybe it was just a cold day or something. But like those two things stood out to me, and I was a little bit not turned away, but slightly concerned.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think the pocket awareness is definitely something that popped off the screen to me as far as the concern. I agree with you in that sense. The only thing I would say is that he was again at Virginia Tech where they were basically treating him like a Wildcat quarterback. So it wasn't like he got a ton of reps as far as being a true, drop back passer. So I'm excited to see him because one thing that we haven't talked about, Joe, which I think is important for this one, because this is a close comparison for me. It honestly is. I would probably defer Levis just because he's younger. Like if I had to choose one, because the one thing we didn't talk about is also the Hendon Hooker is going to be a 25-year-old rookie. So
Yeah.
if he's a developmental guy, he's also already a little bit of an older prospect, which doesn't help his case as far as being in that classification. But the one thing he does have going for him is he has his coaching staff coming back, right? And while you mentioned Kentucky has Stoops, obviously, as their head coach, they did lose their offensive coordinator who went to be the offensive coordinator for the LA Rams this offseason. So they have Rich Scangarello coming in who has had a history of doing good things with quarterbacks, but he is breaking in a new system in his last year at Kentucky while Hendon Hooker gets to stay into the same one under Josh Heupel. So
Yeah.
I think that just the consistency might help both those guys' cases a little bit.
I get that. And one thing I'm starting to realize more and more when I'm watching some of these quarterbacks is how stupid some of the offensive play calling is. Like the same thing happened when I was watching Auburn and their offensive coordinator is now gone, and it makes sense. I kept watching them run the same plays over and over again. It's like how predictable are you going to be and hope to produce results? And it was kind of working because Kentucky's defense for some reason wasn't reacting properly. But I don't know. I didn't think they were really lighting the world on fire offensively. It does help having the same system coming back. I almost wonder if maybe they capped the amount of plays that they were running because Hooker was somewhat new to the system and didn't start the season. But
well, I think I don't know if you agree with this, but I think the Kentucky system, I actually really liked a lot of what they did offensively with Will Levis and
more than I like what Tennessee was doing with Hooker.
Even though if you look at the raw numbers, Tennessee's numbers were way better from a passing perspective. I mean, Hooker put on some really nice numbers in his first year.
I would argue that there were better offensive weapons in Tennessee's offense, and they were trying to stretch the field a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
it was a lot. Kentucky was a lot more short throws, a lot more screens, that kind of stuff. You were getting less of that. I felt like with Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I get that because I would say that Tennessee's definitely more athletic at wide receiver. I mean, you had Wan'Dale Robinson at Kentucky, who's a good athlete who went in the third round, but he's not like a crazy burner. I mean, you had Velus Jones, who just drafted, ran in the 4.3s, and that other wide receiver, I always forget his name, that actually went back to school, who's their leading receiver, Tennessee, who's a really good player, but I can't remember his name right now. But yeah, I think they definitely have more vertical speed from a Tennessee perspective. Just going to be interesting. I think maintaining the same system from a first year to a second year is it's kind of a big thing, to be honest. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on, because I think that if we all saw the numbers that Hooker put in as a first year player under Josh Heupel, having him for a second straight year now being the main offensive play caller, I think is big. Meanwhile, you have a Will Levis who had some success in his first year, but then is completely changing a system, only 1 year each. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. But again, I think if we're deferring, again, I would probably go Levis over Hooker slightly, just because I think that the tools are maybe slightly better, but also he's just younger. Like, that would just kind of be the separation point for me.
Cedric Tillman's the receiver you're referring to.
He's a good player. He's a good player. Yeah,
1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. So I disagree with you on that stance. I would put Levis over Hooker, but I don't consider it to really be that close. And I think that it comes into play what you just talked about. Partially, the age thing is a concern. To have a 25-year-old rookie compared to, like, I don't know how old Levis is going to be. Do you know what the number is off the top of your head?
I will get it right now. Stall for a second. Levis was born in 99, so he will be 24 during his rookie year. So he's not that much younger, actually.
Wait. Because I'm not even 24 yet. Then how does that make sense? I'm 98.
Hendon Hooker was born in 98. So he will be 25 during his rookie year. And Will Levis is born in 99. 6/27, 99. So
all right, well, so let's forget about the age thing for a second.
Will Levis is older than I thought, man. What the heck?
I know. I thought he was a lot younger. Maybe I'm just older than I think I am. I think with all the traits that Levis brings to the table, I'm excited by the arm talent that he has and how powerful his arm is. I'm excited by the type of athlete that he is, and I'm a big upside guy. Like, you've sold me on that approach, that, like, I'm always going to buy into that upside. And I think that if we do get that progression and that improvement this season, like, he's going to be the third wide receiver, third quarterback. He's going to be the third quarterback. It's going to happen if he takes that next step. Now, if he doesn't, I think that this conversation that we're going to be having is going to be completely different come the end of the season. But if we're trying to project, if we're trying to say if someone can ascend and take the next step forward, I kind of understand the hype. I understand it. And I hate that I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I tried not to do that with Stroud versus Bryce Young, but I have to do it here because of the traits, because of the upside.
Yeah, I'm like tentative on it, man. Like, I can get there with Will Levis, I think, if he takes a step forward, and I understand it. I guess my main quarrel with you is that I just don't think that it's that big of a separation between Hooker. I like a third or a late third on Hooker before he went back to school. Like, I like Hendon Hooker. I do. Where would you draft Hendon Hooker? Maybe that's what I just need to understand this.
Somewhere on day 2. I don't know. I gotta get a feel for, like, I haven't ranked any of these quarterbacks. I've watched a good amount of them. I think I've watched over 10 of them at this point. But probably somewhere mid day 2, realistically, because again, he's a traits guy. I don't know if I'm drafting him to be my next starter. Maybe with a hope that he can develop into that. He's definitely better than the guys that we saw get drafted in the 3rd round this past year, I would argue. But I would probably say around there.
That's fair.
All right, I think that's a good note to wrap us up on. Ryan, thank you so much. We've got more coming your way this week. We've got some miscellaneous quarterback thoughts. We might do another comparison show, so stay tuned for that. Hit the subscribe button to stay up to date. At Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft, and at NFL Prospects Pod. Talk to you later, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week.